"It's too much, but I accept," she whispered. The cowboy claimed the Apache woman. The sun hung low over the vast plains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The wind whispered through the tall grasses, carrying the scent of dry earth and distant pine. On the horizon, a lone figure rode steadily, his horse's hooves stirring up small clouds of dust that floated in the golden light. He was a cowboy, rugged and weathered by years of life on the frontier. His face, tanned and lined, showed experience, but his eyes held a spark of curiosity that had not dulled with time. He rode with purpose, yet there was a quiet calm about him, a rhythm in his movements that suggested he belonged to the land itself. At the same time, not far from the small trading post where the cowboy was headed, another figure moved with grace and quiet strength. She was an Apache woman, tall and proud, with hair as dark as the night sky and eyes that reflected the depth of her spirit. Her movements were precise, every step careful, yet filled with confidence. She carried herself with a sense of dignity, not arrogance, but a deep knowledge of who she was and where she came from. Life had not always been easy for her. She had seen the hardships that came with living on the edge of the expanding frontier, the way the world could be both beautiful and cruel. Yet she moved through it with a resilience that was as natural as breathing. Their meeting was not planned. The trading post was small, made of rough-hewn wood with a few wagons tied outside and smoke curling from a chimney. Inside, the smell of fresh bread mixed with the scent of leather and horses, creating an earthy warmth that felt inviting to weary travelers. The cowboy pushed the door open and the bell above it rang softly. He shook the dust from his coat and let his eyes adjust to the dim light. He was looking for supplies, a few essentials for the long ride ahead, and perhaps a moment of rest before he continued his journey. She was already there, examining some goods on a shelf near the back. Her fingers lingered on a piece of cloth, feeling the texture with care. She didn't notice him at first, and he didn't intrude. He could feel her presence, though, a quiet strength that seemed to fill the room without demanding attention. When she finally turned, their eyes met, and in that instant, the world seemed to shrink around them. There was no recognition, no shared history, yet something unspoken passed between them. A flicker of curiosity, a spark of understanding that both startled and intrigued them. The cowboy took a step closer, careful not to startle her. "Good evening," he said, his voice steady but gentle. There was a politeness in his tone, a quiet respect that seemed to honor her presence without overstepping. She nodded slightly, her expression neutral but attentive. "Evening," she replied, her voice calm, carrying a hint of caution. She had learned to trust carefully, to measure the intentions of strangers before allowing herself to feel at ease. Yet there was something in his gaze that made her pause, a feeling that perhaps he was not like the others she had met. The air between them was charged with a subtle tension, not of danger but of curiosity and quiet respect. Both were used to the harshness of the frontier, to the challenges that came with surviving in a world that often did not forgive mistakes. Yet here, in this small trading post, they found themselves connected by something neither fully understood. It was not love, not yet, but it was a recognition of kindred spirits, of people who had walked difficult paths and carried their burdens with dignity. As they moved about the store, their paths crossed again. She reached for a small pouch of dried herbs just as he reached for the same item. Their hands brushed, and she flinched slightly, not out of fear but surprise. He looked at her, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Sorry," he said, genuinely. "You go ahead." She studied him for a moment, her dark eyes searching his face. There was something honest in his manner, a lack of pretense or arrogance. Slowly, she allowed herself a small nod. "Thank you," she said softly. They continued to gather their items, and though words were few, a quiet conversation began. He asked about the weather, about the conditions on the plains, and she answered, her voice steady and composed. He listened attentively, genuinely interested, and she found herself relaxing, letting the guard she always carried slip just a little. It was a strange sensation to feel at ease in the presence of someone so different, yet so respectful. Outside, the sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the dusty ground. The cowboy paid for his supplies and stepped outside, glancing back once to see if she was following. She had not moved yet, still examining the items she had chosen. When she finally came to the counter, she paid for her goods and stepped outside as well. The wind had picked up, rustling the grasses and carrying the scent of distant rain. For a moment they stood there in silence, two figures against the vast backdrop of the plains. He tipped his hat slightly, a gesture of courtesy and acknowledgement. "Safe travels," he said. She met his gaze, her expression thoughtful. "And you?" she replied. There was a weight to her words, a quiet recognition that their paths might cross again, though neither knew how or when. They mounted their horses and rode off in different directions, but the image of each other lingered in their minds. The cowboy thought about the strength in her eyes, the way she moved with both grace and confidence. The Apache woman thought about the calm in his presence, the steady reliability that seemed to surround him like a protective shield. As the evening deepened, the plains took on a hushed, almost sacred quality. The sounds of nature, the distant call of a hawk, the rustle of the grasses, the soft whisper of the wind filled the air. Both felt it, a sense of connection not only to the land but to something larger, something that hinted at possibilities beyond their understanding. The cowboy rode on, thinking of the quiet strength he had witnessed, wondering about the stories she carried, the life she had lived. He felt a curiosity that was different from mere interest. It was a desire to understand, to know the depth of another soul. The Apache woman returned to her path, thinking of the unexpected encounter, of the kindness and respect he had shown. She had met many men in her life, some helpful, some careless, but none had left such an impression. She felt a strange mixture of caution and hope, a recognition that perhaps not all people were as harsh as the world had taught her to expect. Night fell, and the plains were bathed in moonlight, silvering the grasses and turning the landscape into a world of shadows and light. Both rode in silence, each carrying thoughts of the other, of the momentary connection that had been brief yet profound. Neither fully understood what it meant, but both knew it had significance, a spark that might one day grow into something greater. The cowboy set up camp under a lone tree, the fire crackling and sending sparks into the cool night air. He unpacked his small supplies, his mind still returning to the encounter. There was something about her that lingered, a quiet strength and dignity that he had not seen elsewhere. Far away, the Apache woman prepared her camp, tending to her fire and her horse. She too found herself thinking of him, of the calm way he had spoken, the way he had acknowledged her without judgment. It was rare to meet someone who saw her as an equal, who respected her presence without trying to control it. As they each settled into the quiet of the night, the stars above stretched endlessly, a reminder of the vastness of the world and the smallness. Yet in that small fleeting moment, two paths had crossed, and a connection had been made. It was a beginning, though neither could yet see the journey that lay ahead. The plains held their secrets, their beauty, and their challenges. But on this night, they had also held a meeting of souls, two people who might one day find in each other the strength, understanding, and companionship that life had not always offered. And so, the night passed quietly, carrying with it the promise of encounters yet to come, of stories waiting to unfold, and of a bond that, though unspoken, had already begun to take root in the hearts of two unlikely companions. The morning sun rose slowly over the plains, casting long golden beams across the rolling landscape. The wind carried a gentle warmth, and the distant mountains shimmered in the light. The cowboy stirred first, sitting up in his small camp under the tree where he had spent the night. The fire had burned low, leaving a soft layer of glowing embers. He stretched his arms, feeling the stiffness of a long ride, and listened to the quiet sounds of the plains. The faint call of birds, the rustle of grasses, and the distant murmur of a stream. He thought about the woman he had met the evening before. Her presence lingered in his mind, not like a fleeting fancy, but like a quiet echo he could not shake. He remembered the way she had carried herself, the confidence in her eyes, and the calmness in her voice. He had met many people during his travels, but few had left such an impression. There was something different about her, something that felt both familiar and new. a spark of understanding that went beyond words. Far to the west, the Apache woman awoke to the soft light of dawn filtering through the trees. She had spent the night tending to her horse and preparing for the journey ahead. Her thoughts, however, kept returning to the cowboy. She remembered his steady gaze and the quiet respect in the way he had spoken. She had not expected to feel such a connection with a stranger, and yet she could not deny the sense of curiosity and trust that had begun to grow inside her. She knew that meeting him was more than coincidence. It felt like a turning point, a moment that could change the course of her path. The plains stretched endlessly in all directions, and by mid-morning fate brought them together again. A sudden storm had rolled in unexpectedly, dark clouds covering the sky and sending the wind whipping across the grasses. The cowboy had been riding toward a small settlement to resupply, but the storm forced him to seek shelter. By chance, or perhaps by some unseen hand, the Apache woman was traveling in the same direction, her horse moving steadily despite the sudden chill in the air. They met at the edge of a shallow canyon, where the trees offered protection from the growing storm. The cowboy noticed her first, a dark figure against the pale light, moving with purpose and confidence. He slowed his horse and called out, his voice calm but carrying across the distance. "Looks like we're both caught by the storm." She stopped, glancing at him cautiously. For a moment she considered continuing on, but something in his expression, an honesty, a steadiness, made her hesitate. "It seems so," she replied, her voice soft but clear. "We might need to find shelter together." The badger might as small his eyes on him. "I know a spot nearby," he said. "Not much, but it will keep us dry." He gestured toward a natural overhang formed by rock, just wide enough to hold them both and their horses. Without another word she followed, her movements graceful and assured. The silence between them was not awkward, it was comfortable, filled with the quiet understanding that they were both seeking safety from the storm and, in a strange way, companionship for the moment. The rain began to fall in sheets, drumming against the rocks and sending small rivulets down the canyon. The cowboy built a small fire, using dry twigs and careful technique to ensure it would burn despite the dampness. The Apache woman watched him, impressed by his skill and patience. She had learned to survive in harsh conditions herself, but she appreciated the quiet competence of someone who understood the land so well. As the fire caught and warm smoke curled into the air, they settled near it, the horses tethered nearby. The sound of rain around them created a sense of isolation, as though they were the only two people in the world. In that quiet space, a conversation began, not forced, but natural. The cowboy asked about her travels, and she spoke of her life on the plains, her connection to her people, and the lessons she had learned from hardship and survival. He listened intently, asking questions with genuine interest, not out of curiosity alone, but out of a desire to understand her story fully. She found herself sharing more than she usually would with a stranger. The storm seemed to wash away some of her caution, replacing it with a sense of safety and trust. She spoke of her family, the traditions she held dear, and the beauty she saw in the land around them. She spoke of struggles, too, the loss of loved ones, the challenges of living in a world that often misunderstood her people. Yet she did not dwell in sorrow. Her words carried resilience and hope, a strength that had been built over years of perseverance. The cowboy shared his own experiences, though less personal in nature. He spoke of life on the frontier, the hardships of long rides, and the satisfaction that came from work done honestly. He told stories of the people he had met, the places he had seen, and the small acts of kindness that had left lasting impressions on him. His words were simple, but they carried wisdom and experience, and she found herself drawn to his calm and grounded nature. Hours passed, and the storm slowly began to subside. The rain lessened, and the clouds started to break, allowing rays of sunlight to filter through. The fire had dwindled to glowing embers, and the air carried the fresh scent of wet earth and new beginnings. They tended to their horses, feeding and grooming them, and in the process a sense of mutual respect grew stronger. It was during these small, quiet moments that trust began to form. The cowboy had shown he could handle the challenges of the storm with patience and skill, and she recognized his reliability and courage. She had shown that she was capable, independent, and knowledgeable about survival, and he respected her deeply for it. Each had proven to the other that they could rely on one another, and this mutual recognition planted the seeds of a bond that neither had anticipated but both felt quietly building. As the sun reached its peak in the sky, casting warm light across the plains, they decided to continue together for a while. There was safety in numbers, but more than that, there was a growing sense of connection. The cowboy suggested a route through a sheltered valley, one that would keep them mostly out of sight of any dangers that might lurk along the main trails. She agreed, not because she needed guidance, but because she trusted his knowledge and judgment. Their journey was slow but steady. They rode side by side, occasionally exchanging stories or observations about the land around them. A hawk circled above, and they paused to watch it glide effortlessly on the wind. A distant herd of deer bounded across a ridge, and they marveled at the grace of the animals. In these shared moments, a subtle companionship grew, built not on words alone but on the shared experience of navigating the vast and sometimes unforgiving landscape. By evening, they reached a small creek where the water was clear and calm. They stopped to rest, allowing their horses to drink and graze while they set up a modest camp. The cowboy gathered wood for a fire, and she helped, their movements coordinated and natural. Conversation flowed easily, filled with laughter and quiet observations, and for the first time, both felt a sense of ease in each other's presence. As the fire crackled and the sky turned shades of purple and gold, the Apache woman looked at the cowboy and felt something she had not expected: comfort, trust, and a small spark of admiration. She realized that despite the differences in their backgrounds, despite the challenges that might lie ahead, there was a connection worth exploring. The cowboy noticed the shift in her expression, a quiet understanding that spoke volumes without words. He felt the same, a mixture of respect, curiosity, and a desire to know her more fully. Night fell and the stars appeared, countless points of light scattered across the sky. They sat by the fire, sharing stories of the day and reflecting on the journey ahead. The world around them was vast and unpredictable, yet in that moment it felt manageable because they faced it together. Both understood that trust was not given lightly, and both were beginning to realize that this companionship, forged by circumstance and strengthened by understanding, could become something lasting. As they finally settled into their tents for the night, the Apache woman felt a quiet sense of acceptance. She did not yet know what the future held, but she knew that she had found someone she could rely on, someone who respected her and shared the burden of the world without judgment. The cowboy, lying on his bedroll under the stars, thought the same, feeling a rare sense of peace and anticipation for the days ahead. And so, the storm had not only passed from the plains but had also cleared a path for a new bond to form. Two travelers from different worlds had found in each other trust, companionship, and the first hints of a connection that promised to grow as they faced the challenges of the frontier together. The days that followed their meeting were filled with long rides across the vast plains, through valleys carved by ancient rivers, and over hills that caught the sunlight in golden waves. The cowboy and the Apache woman had grown used to each other's presence. Their conversations, once cautious and brief, had become longer and more natural. They spoke of the land, of stories from the past, and of the small moments that made life on the frontier meaningful. There was a quiet comfort in their companionship, an unspoken understanding that they were no longer alone in facing the challenges that surrounded them. One morning, as the sky turned a soft pink with the first light, the two riders approached a narrow canyon that twisted between rocky cliffs. The path was familiar to the cowboy, who knew it as a shortcut to a small settlement several days' ride away. Yet, as they entered the canyon, a sense of unease settled over them. The wind carried a different sound this time, not the gentle rustle of grasses, but a faint, tense murmur that made them both alert. The cowboy slowed his horse, scanning the cliffs and shadows for any sign of danger. His hand rested lightly on the leather strap of his saddle, ready to act if needed. The Apache woman rode beside him, her senses equally sharp, her eyes following every movement in the canyon. "Something's not right," she said quietly, her voice low but steady. She had lived with danger all her life and had learned to trust her instincts. Before the cowboy could respond, a sudden movement caught their attention. From the rocks above, a small group of men emerged, rough and unshaven, their intentions clear from the way they blocked the path. They carried weapons, but their eyes held more curiosity than malice. Yet the cowboy and the Apache woman knew enough of the world to sense the threat. The cowboy spoke first, keeping his voice calm and even. "We don't want trouble," he said, his eyes steady on the men. "We're just passing through." One of the men sneered, stepping forward. "Funny," he said. "We don't get many people here who don't look like trouble." His companions laughed softly, but the tension in the air remained thick. The Apache woman shifted slightly, her hand brushing against the pouch of herbs she carried at her belt. She didn't want to escalate the situation, but she was ready to defend herself if necessary. "We mean no harm," she said firmly, her voice carrying authority. "We are travelers, like you." For a tense moment there was silence. Then the cowboy stepped slightly forward, his posture relaxed but confident. "We only want to continue our journey," he said again. His calm tone seemed to give the Apache woman a sense of safety, as though he alone could navigate the danger with skill and experience. After what felt like an eternity, the men exchanged glances. Finally, the one in front waved a hand, motioning them to proceed. "Fine," he said gruffly. "Just don't cause trouble." Their eyes lingered for a moment, then they moved aside, disappearing back into the rocks. The cowboy exhaled slowly, feeling the tension leave his shoulders. The Apache woman allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible nod. They had faced a threat together, and the encounter had strengthened the silent bond between them. They rode on, the canyon shadows stretching long in the morning light, carrying with them a shared understanding of courage and resilience. As they emerged from the canyon, the landscape opened into rolling plains dotted with wildflowers and tall grasses. The sun was now higher, warming the earth and casting a golden glow over everything. The cowboy suggested they stop for a while at a small stream nearby. The water was clear and cool, and the Apache woman welcomed the chance to rest and tend to their horses. They set up a modest camp by the edge of the stream. The cowboy gathered firewood while she tended to the horses, brushing their coats and checking their hooves. As they worked, their conversation turned to their personal histories. She spoke of her childhood among her people, the lessons she had learned from elders, and the traditions that shaped her understanding of the world. Her words carried wisdom and experience, and the cowboy listened with a mixture of respect and admiration. He in turn spoke of life on the frontier, the long rides, the changing seasons, and the people he had met along the way. He told stories of small acts of kindness he had witnessed, of the friendships he had formed, and of the challenges he had faced alone. Though his words were simple, they carried depth, reflecting a life lived with honesty and perseverance. The afternoon passed peacefully, the sound of the stream flowing nearby, and the gentle rustle of the wind through the grasses creating a serene atmosphere. Yet both knew that life on the frontier was unpredictable, and that danger could appear without warning. They remained vigilant, their bond growing stronger with each shared experience. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, they prepared to continue their journey. The cowboy suggested a route that would take them along a ridge, offering a better view of the surrounding land and any potential threats. She agreed, trusting his knowledge and experience. The ride along the ridge was slow but steady. They moved in silence for a while, the beauty of the landscape filling the quiet space between them. Rolling hills stretched to the horizon, dotted with wildflowers and the occasional lone tree. A hawk circled overhead, and they paused briefly to watch it glide effortlessly on the wind. It was during this quiet moment that a sudden cry pierced the air, a sharp, urgent call that sent both of them on high alert. From a nearby grove, a small group of riders appeared, moving quickly and deliberately toward them. The cowboy's instincts kicked in immediately. He signaled the Apache woman to stay close and kept his hand near the leather strap of his saddle, ready to act. The riders approached, their expressions serious and determined. It became clear that this was no casual encounter. They carried news of trouble, and their presence demanded attention. The cowboy and the Apache woman listened as the leader spoke of a nearby settlement under threat from bandits. Homes had been burned, livestock stolen, and families forced to flee. The danger was real and immediate, and it was clear that help was needed. Without hesitation, the cowboy and the Apache woman agreed to assist. Though they had only recently met, their sense of responsibility and courage drove them to act. They rode quickly toward the settlement, navigating the rough terrain with skill and determination. Along the way, they shared strategies and observations, their trust in each other growing with every step. When they arrived, the scene was one of chaos and despair. Smoke rose from burned homes, and frightened families huddled together, unsure of what to do next. The cowboy and the Apache woman quickly assessed the situation, organizing the villagers and guiding them to safety. They worked tirelessly, their movements coordinated and efficient, combining his experience with the land and her knowledge of strategy and survival. By the time the sun set completely, casting the plains in the soft glow of twilight, the immediate threat had been managed. Families were safe and the few remaining bandits had been driven off or captured. The villagers expressed their gratitude, their faces filled with relief and appreciation. Yet amidst the relief, the cowboy and the Apache woman shared a quiet, unspoken understanding. They had faced danger together, relied on each other's strengths, and emerged stronger for it. As they rode away from the settlement, the Apache woman spoke softly, her voice carrying a mixture of awe and gratitude.
"I didn't expect to find someone I could trust so quickly," she admitted.
You are different." The cowboy smiled, a small, genuine smile that reflected both humility and understanding. "And you are stronger than I realized," he replied. "I've seen many people, but few can face the world the way you do." Their words hung in the air, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond that had formed between them. It was not love, not yet, but it was the beginning of something deeper, a recognition of shared courage, respect, and understanding. They rode on in silence, the night wrapping around them like a protective cloak, and both knew that the turning point had been reached. They had faced danger, proven their strength, and discovered a partnership that neither had anticipated but both now relied upon. As they settled under a lone tree for the night, the stars stretching endlessly above, the Apache woman felt a sense of clarity she had not experienced before. The cowboy had shown her loyalty, courage, and patience, and she realized that the connection between them was no longer fleeting. It was real and meaningful. He in turn reflected on the resilience and intelligence she had shown, understanding that their bond had grown stronger through shared experience and mutual respect. The night passed quietly, filled with a sense of calm after the day's storm of events. Both knew that challenges would continue, that the frontier was unpredictable and often unforgiving. Yet for the first time they felt a sense of confidence, not only in their own abilities but in the strength they found in each other. And so the turning point had come. Danger had tested them. Trust had been forged in fire, and the foundation of a lasting bond had been laid. Two travelers from different worlds and backgrounds had discovered that together they could face challenges, overcome fear, and navigate the unpredictable landscape of life on the plains. The days that followed the crisis at the settlement were quieter, but they carried a weight all their own. The cowboy and the Apache woman continued their journey across the plains, their horses moving steadily over the gentle hills and through the wide valleys. The land seemed different now, not because it had changed, but because they themselves had changed. The shared danger, the trust that had grown in the fire of that day, lingered in every glance, every small gesture. They no longer needed words to understand each other. There was a rhythm to their companionship, a silent connection that spoke louder than conversation. One evening, as the sun began its descent, painting the sky with deep shades of orange and pink, they came to a secluded valley. The valley was surrounded by low cliffs and scattered trees, with a gentle stream running through its center. The place felt like a hidden world, untouched and peaceful, a sanctuary away from the challenges of the frontier. They decided to stop here for the night, setting up a small camp near the water. The cowboy worked quickly, gathering dry wood and building a fire. The flames leapt high, casting warm light and long shadows across the ground. The Apache woman tended to the horses, brushing their coats and giving them water from the stream. Her hands moved with careful precision, each movement reflecting the years of experience she had gained in living closely with the land. There was a quiet dignity in the way she carried herself, and the cowboy watched her from across the fire, admiration in his eyes. For a long time they sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. The cowboy finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "You handled yourself well back there," he said, referring to the confrontation at the settlement. "I've met many people, but few faced danger as calmly as you did." She looked at him, her dark eyes reflecting the firelight. There was a softness there, a vulnerability that she rarely allowed others to see. "I didn't expect to find someone like you either," she admitted. "You didn't hesitate, you didn't fear. You stood beside me when it mattered most." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Both understood that this was more than praise, it was recognition, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond that had formed between them. The cowboy shifted closer to the fire, studying her face with a careful attention he did not bother to hide. "I didn't need to hesitate," he said quietly, "because I knew I could trust you. You're strong, clever, and I've never met anyone like you before." Her gaze softened, and for the first time, she allowed herself to feel the depth of her emotions. She had been cautious, guarded, protecting herself from disappointment and danger. Yet here was a man who respected her, who had shown her courage and loyalty without expectation. She felt something stir inside her, a mixture of relief, trust, and the first hints of affection. The fire crackled between them, a comforting presence in the quiet of the evening. The cowboy extended his hand slightly, a subtle gesture of companionship. She hesitated for only a moment before placing her hand in his, a spark of warmth passing between them. Neither spoke, but the gesture spoke volumes. It was an acknowledgement of the connection they had built, a promise that they were no longer alone. As the stars began to appear, scattered across the sky like tiny jewels, the Apache woman turned her gaze upward, letting herself feel the beauty and vastness of the world around them. "It's overwhelming sometimes," she whispered, her voice soft. "The world is so big, so full of challenges, and yet, meeting you, it makes it feel manageable." The cowboy listened, understanding the weight of her words.
"I know," he said gently. "Life isn't easy, but we find people along the way who make it worth the struggle."
"You're one of those people for me." Her breath caught slightly at his words. She had not expected such honesty, such clarity of feeling. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint scent of the stream and the earth. And in that moment, everything felt suspended, as though the world had narrowed down to just the two of them. The Apache woman looked at him, her heart heavy with a mix of fear and hope. "It's too much," she whispered, almost to herself. "To feel this, to trust someone so quickly, it's too much. But I accept." The cowboy's eyes softened, a gentle smile forming on his lips. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face with tender care. "And I accept you," he said simply. "All of you. Your strength, your courage, everything that makes you who you are." She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sense of relief and joy that she had not thought possible. For so long she had guarded her heart, keeping it safe from disappointment and betrayal. Yet here was someone who had shown her nothing but respect and understanding. Someone who valued her for who she truly was. She leaned slightly toward him, letting herself feel the closeness, the comfort of being understood and accepted. They spent the rest of the evening near the fire, talking quietly, sharing stories, and learning more about each other. The cowboy spoke of his past, the hardships he had faced, and the lessons he had learned from a life lived on the frontier. She listened with attention and empathy, offering her own insights and experiences in return. Their conversation flowed naturally, filled with laughter, thoughtful pauses, and a deepening sense of connection. As the night deepened, the world outside their small camp became quiet and still. The stars shone brightly above, reflected in the calm waters of the stream. The Apache woman felt the sense of peace she had not experienced before. She realized that in trusting the cowboy she had found a companion, someone who could walk beside her through life's challenges without judgment or expectation. The cowboy, for his part, felt a rare sense of contentment. He had spent years traveling alone, relying on his own skill and resilience to survive. Yet in the presence of the Apache woman, he discovered something he had not known he was missing. A deep, quiet partnership, a bond built on trust, respect, and the beginnings of love. They spoke little as they settled near their fire, the night wrapping around them like a protective blanket. Their hands found each other again, fingers entwined in a gesture of quiet commitment. Words were unnecessary. The simple act of being together, of sharing this space and this moment, carried more meaning than any declaration could. The Apache woman leaned her head slightly against the cowboy's shoulder, a small gesture of intimacy that spoke of trust and acceptance. He rested his cheek gently against her hair, feeling the softness and warmth that reassured him that this bond was real and enduring. They sat in silence, letting the firelight and the quiet of the night speak for them, a language of understanding and connection that needed no words. Time passed slowly, marked only by the gentle crackle of the fire and the distant call of night birds. Both reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The chance meeting at the trading post, the shared dangers, and the moments of courage that had forged their trust. It was clear now that the turning point had led to something more profound, a recognition that their lives were intertwined in a way neither had expected, but both now embraced. As sleep began to claim them, the Apache woman whispered once more, a soft affirmation of the bond they had formed.
"I accept all of it," she murmured, her words carrying the weight of sincerity and courage.
The cowboy held her hand a little tighter, offering his silent agreement. "And I accept you," he whispered back, the quiet night bearing witness to their mutual promise. In that secluded valley, under the endless sky, two people from different worlds had found each other. They had faced danger, tested their trust, and discovered a connection built on respect, understanding, and the courage to embrace the unknown. Though challenges lay ahead, they knew that together they could face whatever the frontier, or life itself, threw their way. And so the night passed, calm and peaceful, holding the promise of tomorrow. The Apache woman and the cowboy had reached an emotional climax in their journey together, acknowledging their feelings, accepting their bond, and stepping into a new chapter of their shared life. The connection between them was no longer tentative. It was real, heartfelt, and enduring. A partnership forged in trust, strengthened by courage, and celebrated in quiet, unspoken understanding. The next morning, the valley was bathed in a soft golden light. The wind carried the scent of the stream and the earth, fresh after the previous day's storm. The cowboy and the Apache woman rose quietly, sharing a small breakfast of bread and dried meat. Their movements were easy, comfortable, filled with the silent understanding that had grown between them over the past days. Neither needed to speak much. They had learned to move in rhythm with each other, anticipating needs and sharing small gestures of care. The journey ahead was long, but there was no rush. The cowboy suggested a route along the ridges, where the land was safer and the water sources more plentiful. She agreed, trusting his knowledge of the land and the wisdom he carried in each decision. The horses, now well rested, stepped lightly along the path, their hooves making soft impressions in the damp earth. As they rode, the Apache woman reflected on the journey that had brought them together. She thought of the initial meeting at the trading post, of the storm that had forced them to seek shelter together, and of the dangers they had faced side by side. Each moment had built trust and understanding, creating a bond stronger than she could have imagined. She realized that she no longer felt the fear that had once been constant in her life. With him by her side, the world seemed more navigable, its challenges less overwhelming. The cowboy, meanwhile, felt a similar sense of peace. He had spent years wandering the plains alone, relying only on himself. Now, with her beside him, he experienced a sense of partnership he had never known. He admired her strength, her wisdom, and her courage, and he felt a deep gratitude for the way she had shared herself with him. Their connection was rare, a quiet but powerful force that made the trials of the frontier feel less daunting. Midway through the day, they came to a small cluster of trees near a creek. The spot was sheltered and offered both water and shade. They decided to rest, allowing their horses to drink and graze while they sat on the soft grass. The cowboy pulled a small journal from his saddlebag, something he had carried for years but seldom shared. He wrote a few lines, capturing memories of the journey and the people he had met. Curious, the Apache woman leaned closer to see his words. "You write down your thoughts?" she asked, her voice filled with interest. He nodded. "It helps me remember, helps me make sense of the world," he said simply. "Life moves fast and moments can pass without notice. Writing them down, it keeps them alive." She smiled softly. "I understand," she said. "We all need ways to hold on to what matters." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small bundle of dried herbs, arranging them carefully. "These are from my people," she explained. "They carry memory, healing, and guidance. I carry them with me to remember where I come from." The gesture struck the cowboy deeply. He realized that just like him, she carried pieces of her past with her, pieces that shaped who she was and guided her through life. In that quiet moment, the depth of their connection became even clearer. They were not simply companions on a journey. They were partners in navigating life itself, learning from each other and growing together. The afternoon passed in calm conversation and shared tasks. They repaired the small supplies they carried, tended to the horses, and collected water for the evening. There was laughter, too, small and light, breaking the quiet in a way that made the day feel gentle and full of life. They spoke of dreams and hopes, imagining a future where they could live with freedom, respect, and purpose. Though the frontier was unpredictable, they allowed themselves to envision a life together, one where their strengths complemented each other and their bond provided a foundation for courage and resilience. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet, they continued on their path. The landscape stretched endlessly, hills and plains bathed in the warm light of evening. The cowboy rode slightly ahead, scanning the horizon for any signs of danger, while she followed closely, her eyes observing the land with the careful attention that had kept her safe for so long. Night fell slowly, bringing with it a blanket of stars that seemed to stretch without end. They stopped near a small hill where the wind was gentle, and they set up camp for the night. The fire was small but warm, casting dancing shadows on the ground. They ate a quiet meal, sharing bread, dried meat, and the occasional berry they had gathered along the way. The world felt calm, almost sacred, as if it had paused to allow them this peace. After the meal, they sat together near the fire, their shoulders touching lightly, a gesture of comfort and intimacy. The cowboy spoke softly, his voice carrying in the quiet night. "We've been through a lot," he said, "and yet I feel, I don't know, lighter somehow. With you here, the world feels different." She nodded, her eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. "I feel the same," she admitted. "I've carried fear and caution for so long, and being with you, it feels safe. Not just from danger, but safe to be myself."
He reached out, taking her hand gently.
"You can always be yourself with me," he said. "I'll stand by you, no matter what comes. Together, we can face anything." Her heart swelled at his words. She had never expected to find such honesty, such loyalty, such understanding. She pressed her hand against his, feeling the warmth and reassurance in his touch. "I believe that," she whispered. "And I want to face it all with you." The cowboy smiled, a small, content smile that reflected the depth of his feelings. "Then we will," he said. "Step by step, day by day.
We'll make our way together." They spent the night by the fire talking quietly, sharing dreams and reflecting on their journey.
The Apache woman spoke of her people and traditions, teaching him stories and lessons that had been passed down through generations. He listened intently, absorbing every detail, feeling a growing respect and admiration for her wisdom and heritage. In turn, he shared his experiences, tales of the frontier, and lessons learned through hardship and perseverance. In the quiet of the night, they found comfort in each other's presence. Their connection had grown beyond simple companionship. It had become a partnership built on trust, respect, and mutual support. They had faced danger, navigated the unknown, and discovered the strength that came from being together. Morning came once more, with light spilling across the plains. The cowboy and the Apache woman prepared to continue their journey, their movements smooth and synchronized. There was a sense of purpose in each step, a feeling that the path ahead, though uncertain, was one they could face together. They mounted their horses, the animals ready and strong, and set off toward the horizon, the wind carrying the scent of freedom and possibility. As they rode, they spoke of the life they hoped to build, a life filled with respect for the land, for each other, and for the people they would meet along the way. They envisioned a small home near the stream where the seasons would mark their days, and where they could welcome travelers, share stories, and teach the lessons they had learned. They spoke of laughter, of hard work, and of the quiet moments that made life meaningful. Though the world was vast and unpredictable, the cowboy and the Apache woman felt a deep sense of certainty in one thing. They had each other. Their bond, forged through shared experiences and strengthened by trust, had become the foundation of a life that could weather any storm. They knew that challenges would continue, that the frontier was harsh and often unforgiving, but together they were strong. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the plains in a warm amber glow. The cowboy and the Apache woman rode side by side, their hearts filled with hope and determination. They had faced the trials of the frontier and discovered the power of partnership, respect, and love. With each step, they moved closer to a future they could build together. A future defined not by fear or uncertainty, but by courage, trust, and the promise of shared life. As night fell and the stars filled the sky, they settled in a quiet grove for the evening. The fire flickered gently, casting a soft light over their surroundings. The Apache woman leaned against the cowboy, feeling the security and warmth that had become so familiar. He held her hand, a silent promise that he would always be there no matter what the future held. And so, in that quiet corner of the frontier, two people from different worlds had found each other. They had faced danger, built trust, and discovered a bond that was stronger than fear, prejudice, or uncertainty. Together, they had chosen acceptance, courage, and partnership. Together, they would continue to face the challenges of life, building a new beginning from the strength they had found in one another. The plains stretched endlessly before them, full of unknown paths and endless possibilities. But for the cowboy and the Apache woman, the journey was no longer daunting. It was an adventure to be shared, a life to be lived together, a story of resilience, trust, and the quiet triumph of hearts that had chosen each other.